What's up friends? Welcome to this new video. Today I'm going to tell you a bit of a spooky story. Because in this video I will tell you about the scariest grandma that you have probably ever heard of. So let's just dive straight into it. So this story starts off with this man named Bert. He has schizophrenia, but he's a very nice guy and he means no harm to no one. Bert is also homeless, and one day this nice social worker finds Bert and she decides she wants to help Bert. The social worker wants to find a home for Bert because she wants to help him, and this is how the social worker finds Dorothea Puente. Now, Dorothea Puente looks like a very friendly old lady. Dorothea runs a boarding home, and in this boarding home she has rooms for homeless people that can stay there. So what she does is she requests social security checks for these homeless people. She then claims these checks for herself, but in exchange she gives the homeless people a room and she gives them some warm food, which sounds like a fair deal, right? So in the beginning, Bert is pretty satisfied with living with Dorothea. He has a nice room now, he has a TV and he has a bed and he has something to eat. So everything seems nice, right? Wrong! At one point, the social worker decides to call Dorothea because she wants to check in on Bert. But Dorothea gives a kind of a strange story. She says that Bert isn't here right now. Bert traveled all the way to Mexico to stay with Dorothea's brother because there was supposed to be a party there. The social worker thinks this is kind of strange because Bert isn't like this at all. He's not really a party guy. So she asks, when is he gonna come back? Dorothea says, no worries, he'll be back by Friday. So the social worker gives her a call again on Friday. She gives another excuse. She says, oh, he's gonna be here on Monday. So the social worker says, okay, if he's not there on Monday, I'm gonna file for a missing person report to the police. Then on Monday, Dorothea gives a call and she says, oh, Bert came back. But his relatives picked him up and they took him to another state. Which is also unbelievable. Bert wasn't in touch with his relatives at all. So again, strange story. So the social worker decides to go to the police and file a missing person report. An officer comes by, she speaks to Dorothea, she speaks to the other residents in the home, and they all give the same story. Everyone says Bert had left with a relative. But then one of the residents slips the officer a note. And this note says, she wants me to lie to you. So they decide to interview this resident, and let's just see how that goes.
What did she tell you exactly?
She just said, John, I'm going to ask you to lie for me today. She said, I think I'm going to jail. And she said, the police are coming out. And she said, I want you to tell them that I was gone Thursday and Friday. And that you saw Bert on Saturday. And she said,
And you knew you hadn't seen him for over 2 months.
I knew I hadn't seen him. And she said, I'll make it well worth your while.
So the detective starts to do some research on Dorothea Puente. And what the detective finds is that she was actually on parole. Apparently, Dorothea Puente pretended to be a medical practitioner in the past. She would visit elderly people in elderly homes and she would put knockout drugs in their drinks. All of them reported the same thing. They woke up, all of their valuable items were gone, all their jewelry, all their social security checks. So basically Dorothea Puente would drug old people and steal their stuff. He also finds out that everyone thinks she's 70, but apparently she's 50. She's just pretending to look older, so she looks more innocent. So the detective decides to pay Dorothea Puente a visit. The social worker pushes the detective into bringing shovels along, because she's really worried. So the detective comes along and speaks with Dorothea. She has a good answer to everything they ask. So then they start searching their home and they find these blue pills everywhere. And apparently they were diazepam pills, which are pills you take when you have sleeping disorders. So at that point, the detective realizes something is really wrong here. The detective doesn't really find anything to bring her in. So he says to Dorothea everything is okay and she thinks everything is over. But then he says, oh, one more thing. I kind of want to dig in your yard. And she asks, why do you want to dig in my yard? And he says, well, the social worker asked me to. I just wanted to tell her. We've looked everywhere. So Dorothea agrees. She says, okay, you can dig in my yard. So the detective starts digging. He notices Dorothea stands up on the second floor on her balcony just staring at him digging, which is already kind of weird. And after digging for a while, he finds pieces of cloth. You know, pieces of clothing. So he continues to dig and then he finds this brown leather. He didn't really know what it was at the time. So he continues to dig and then his shovel struck something hard. He digs it out to see what it was, and apparently it was bone. And he pulls it out and it was a complete human arm. So he realizes that they had found a human body. The brown pieces of leather were apparently not leather, but it was human flesh.
Sacramento police dug up the backyard of a home at 1426 F Street after receiving a tip that renters there were being poisoned and buried. Police did indeed find some human remains and took the landlord, Dorothy Puentes, along with her tenants in for questioning.
So obviously they take in Dorothea for questioning, which makes sense since they just found a body in their yard.
Nothing makes sense here, Dorothea. Nothing makes sense. Everything you said, you can't really substantiate. Mr. McCauley tells me another thing, Mr. Sharp tells me another thing, and I've got a guy that's been missing for at least 2.5, 3 months. You know what I heard? I heard, hey, Dorothea over at 1426 F Street, killing people and burying them in their backyard. How do you explain the body in the backyard?
I don't
2.5
know.
feet down,
I don't
with
know.
clothing
I
and
don't
everything
know.
with it. How?
When you find out how old it is and see that I didn't have anything to do with that,
Dorothea,
sir, I don't know anything
I'm going to
about
ask you right now again. Are there any other bodies
it. No,
in your backyard?
not that I didn't even know that one was there.
So Dorothea has an answer to everything. She just denies everything. She keeps playing the victim role, but at least they have enough to dig up her whole yard. So while they're digging up the yard, Dorothea asks the detective, hey, am I under arrest? And at that time, they didn't really have anything to officially put her under arrest. So he says no, and she says, okay, I want to drink some coffee around the corner. And he says, okay, you can drink coffee around the corner. So they continue to dig, and again, the shovel strikes something hard. And this time it was a complete human leg. So the detective says to an officer, get Dorothea, get her from the coffee shop that's around the corner. And a couple minutes later the officer comes back and he says, wait, did you mean the coffee shop around the corner or another one? And the detective realizes, shit, she's gone. So at this point they decide to start a nationwide manhunt for Dorothea Puente. So now that she's gone, they just decide to dig up her whole yard. And they found another body, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one. In total they find 7 bodies.
They have begun the grisly business of examining the 7 victims. Most were found in the fetal position, wrapped in tablecloths and plastic bags.
This is dig site number 3. What he is holding there would appear to be fingers.
So one of the bodies they found is really huge. It was wrapped in plastic and blanket, and unfortunately it turns out to be bird. Apparently she just ran the boarding home so that she could get homeless people there. Then she would ask for social security checks for those homeless people. And then after she killed those homeless people, she could continue to cash these social security checks even while they were dead. All these homeless people didn't really have any family, so they had no one that came looking for them. So no one would even notice that they were gone.
We found 7 bodies now, and we won't stop until we've dug up every square inch of this yard.
Neighbors are wondering why they never noticed anything.
Never. Never any indication. I can't believe it. Right next door to my house.
But luckily, a couple months later, they catch her.
She fled 400 miles to Los Angeles under an assumed name before she was recognized in a neighborhood bar.
I remember seeing her face, and I put Sacramento together.
He called a local TV station, and it was this tip that led police to arrest Puente at the motel where she was staying.
I used to be a very good person at one time.
So Dorothea gets charged for a total of 9 murders. Apparently she also killed 2 people before she started the boarding home.
What did they have? They had their little social security check. And they had their life. That's all they had. They didn't have cars, they didn't have houses, they didn't have a lot of clothes, they didn't have anything.
So it was a difficult case. Dorothea claims she's guilty to cashing their checks, but that all of them died from natural causes in their sleep, that she would just bury them and use their checks.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Dorothea Montalvo Puente, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
The defendant is to be imprisoned in the state prison for a term of life without possibility of parole.
A jury has convicted California landlady Dorothea Puente of murder. She was charged with killing 9 people and cashing their Social Security checks. The jury declared her guilty of 3 murders and deadlocked on 6 others.
Luckily, the jury doesn't believe her. They can only charge her for 3 of the murders, but still, she gets sentenced to life in prison without parole. Later, at the age of 82, Dorothea passes away in prison, which is probably for the best.
A landlady convicted of killing 3 of her tenants in the 1980s has died in prison. Prosecutors say Dorothea Puente stole the Social Security checks of her elderly tenants, killed them, and then buried their bodies in her backyard. Puente was 82.
And yeah, that is pretty much the whole story. It was a pretty dark story. I hope you guys like it. Let me know in the comments what you thought about it. Please subscribe, click the like button so that I don't have to get a job. And hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.